Welcome back to Let Us In podcast. Today we're talking about vampires. I'm Crystal from Creepin It Spooky.
I'm Justine, aka JustineUFF.
I'm Emma, aka Emma of the Impact.
Stick around to the end because we're going to do a rapid ranking of our top 5 hottest or sexiest vampires. Make sure you guys like the video. If you enjoy this video, hit that share button, show us to your friends. This is a thirsty one. People like vampires, so make sure you share us. Subscribe and hit that bell if you guys want to get notified of our next upload, which is Tuesdays.
I tried my best to be a little Lost Boysy. You know, I was going for Laddie / Keither Sutherland as David. The Lost Boys is probably one of my favorite movies. I watched them when I was really young, back when teenagers seemed like adults. Now they seem like children, but they seem like adults. So there was this whole cool aspect. And the cinematographer of that movie did the cinematography Taxi Driver. And that movie originally was pitched as Goonies, but vampires. They were going to be kids. But when Joel Schumacher was brought on to direct, he wanted to make more of like a Rebel Without a Cause. Joel Schumacher also, he is gay. And there's a lot of gay themes in Lost Boys that some people read into, some people don't. A lot of homosexual youth at the time in the 80s would be kicked out of their homes. They wouldn't have a home. They'd be transient. And it kind of relates to that with the Lost Boys, the whole Peter Pan thing. Lost Boys is very fun. A lot of it was the music. And it's interesting that the song Cry Little Sister was written before the movie was made. Joel Schumacher contacted the artist and commissioned him to make a song for this movie. And he made Cry Little Sister, and Joel Schumacher had said, I don't know how you made the perfect song of the movie I was picturing. So a lot of that element is in there. I love the boardwalk. Santa Cruz made into Santa Carla. That is a big part of the draw, is the boardwalk for me as well.
Such a good set. I love the like midnight carnival style atmosphere at the very beginning, like right at the out front of the film. I love the
POV
full
shot.
aesthetic. Yeah. Oh yeah, that POV shot's so cool.
Over the water. It's just really cool. And I
you
really
have
like
POV shots for most of the film, actually,
and they're the vampires flying,
and you're discovering them with Michael, which I think is so cool because they seem very cool, like, oh, I want to be them, and then you discover that they're monsters. And I like that they chose to make ugly vampires in this film because I think that really highlights that discovery.
And it's the first vampire movie with glitter. Before Twilight sparkled, which we're not going to diss Twilight. Twilight wasn't made for our age demographic. I do appreciate camp. They put glitter in the blood of the Lost Boys.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they did. And you can really see it when they try to go to the vampire nest and kill them there, and they kill Marco.
Oh yeah.
And when you see the Frog Boys, Michael and his brother go out, you see the blood on them, you really see the glitter in that scene. But do you guys see David and Michael as more of a couple than Star and Michael? There's no wrong answer. My answer is just the right one, which is David and Michael.
I actually don't see any coupling with any of them, to be honest. I see an attraction with Star that he has initially, but I see like most of their relationship throughout the film is her kind of wanting to protect him from what bad decisions that she made, and also at the same time ask for help for her and Laddie. But I don't see them like as a relation. Like I don't feel any of the romance in this film at all. To me, this film is more about platonic relationships and friendships and kind of self-discovery more than anything. But I can definitely see the themes that people are seeing with that, and like I can see the homosexual relationship and the heterosexual relationships. I can see those, but they're not like a focus to me. To me, it's more about platonic relationships and familial relationships.
I tend to agree with that, actually.
Oh no, I totally am. I don't think that even though Joel Schumacher's a gay man and and there are these themes there, I don't think it was intentional that David and Michael were a thing. But David and Michael totally are a thing. And if they remake The Lost Boys, I think that they should go in that direction. I think that would be an interesting way to do it. Now that I'm older and watch The Lost Boys, about when you're a teenager, you think everything's about you. But the whole thing was about Diane Wiest, really. The whole plot was he wanted that Diane Wiest snatch. He wanted
do not like her in this
I
movie.
do. She's like a mom character. How
She
can you not
is
like
a
Diane Weiss?
latchkey mom who doesn't listen to her kids. I do not like that at all. You
What?
cannot be a mom who just works all the time and doesn't pay attention or take care of your kids all day, and who completely just lets them do whatever they want, but then turn around when they
Let them
tell
do whatever
you,
they wanted.
oh yes she did, oh yes she did. Michael watched The
I'm
Youngest.
not a mom, so that's why I'm not a mother. I thought Diane Weiss was a good mother in that movie, so that's why I'm not a mother.
She's a latchkey mom who also didn't listen to her kids, and that's a problem. You cannot have that, because then your kids are going to meet vampires, they're going to bring them home, and you're all going to get killed.
Don't you think, Crystal? Do you think she's supposed to
She
be a good
is
mom
the
or an
perfect
okay mom?
capturing of the latchkey mom parenting style that happened in the 80s and 90s.
Well, she's not a horrible mom.
There's a whole scene of Michael coming home and she goes, "Are we still friends? Can we talk?" Like, there is a whole scene where she does that. But
good thing I'm not a mom. Holy shit, I'd be the worst.
I don't know. When you say though that her kids are, rebelling and bringing home vampires, like, so did she though. Like, she literally dated the head vampire.
That is my point.
Yeah.
That is my
So,
point.
She didn't know he was a vampire. He was a nice man that gave her a job. Although you shouldn't date your boss.
True.
Maybe she's not a good mom, but and the idea that teenagers think it's all about them, but it really was about Diane Weiss. That Max wanted that Diane Weiss snatch. That's, and he also wanted her to be kind of a mom to everybody
because she helped like one stray kid.
No, it was because the Lost Boys, David, and the others had come into the store, and he's like, "I thought I told you guys not to ever come in here." And she's like, "Oh, we were young once, but they dressed better." That was it. And then there was a boy that was lost. That's right.
The combination of those two things happening.
Well,
and he was like,
that, and also
mom.
he's like, "Look at that petite little short-haired pixie frame. That's my kind of lady."
Manic pixie dream mom.
Manic pixie dream mom. Give me that manic pixie dream mom. Diane Weiss with the little voice. I like Diane Weiss. I like her movies. That's interesting perspective. And that also brings perspective. Thank God I never had a child, because I'd be a latchkey mom. I think that if they remade it, it wouldn't, I know that it probably wouldn't go in this direction. Wouldn't it be interesting if they had it kind of like Euphoria, but with vampires? I think that would be interesting.
That's exactly what I did not like about the I Know What You Did Last Summer reboot show.
I did not see the reboot, and I didn't even like the original.
Whoa.
I'm hurt that you don't like my mom.
I am actually really curious about the remake. I wonder, I know that it's casting and it's supposed to be a TV show, or was going to be a TV show. I don't know if it still is a TV show or like just a full-on reboot, but I do wonder if they're going to keep it in the like 80s or if they're going to modernize it. I heard rumors it was going to be like modern, and I would prefer it if they actually did it in the 90s instead of the 80s and kept it before cell phones still. But I don't know, because I feel like
in the 80s it was modern then, so it makes sense that they would have it for a modern audience. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I do want it for a modern audience. I don't think I'm the audience, that's for sure. I like the idea of reintroducing the Lost Boys to another generation. I just think that there's something special about capturing some of these really iconic eras in films with vampires, because vampires are a very creative outlet for doing some pretty fantastical stuff. And I think that's why I'm so drawn to vampire films, because they're always so over the top, and like, that's okay. So like Queen of the Damned, I think that Queen of the Damned is epitome of like the late 90s, early 2000s kind of transition in sound and style of film. This like combination of rock and vampires with that classic story. Now, I know Anne Rice didn't like it. I know a lot of people don't like it. I know a lot of people objectively think
fun.
it's a bad
I don't
film,
remember it very well, but it's fun. But it's also like Lost Boys. It's a different movie than Lost Boys, but like Lost Boys, it also has a banger soundtrack.
So it's actually, it is my favorite soundtrack of all time. The Queen of the Damned soundtrack of all time. That's like every time anybody asks me, what's your favorite soundtrack in a horror movie? Queen of the Damned, without question. I can listen to that soundtrack over and over and over again. I think Jonathan Davis is just incredibly talented. Him and Trent Reznor, I think, do the best with film, horror, sound. I think they know how to tell a story with it. Stuart Townsend, Aaliyah, like all of the whole cast is just so sexy. And like,
I just remember Aaliyah because she's especially sexy.
The whole movie is sexy, like beginning to end. I mean,
It's hard to top Aaliyah in it though. Like she's like she's just like out sexies them all.
I love Stuart Townsend. That's why I had a big crush on him for a long time after Queen of the Damned. Like there was no better looking man than Stuart Townsend as Lestat. So it came out in 2002, which was high school for me, I think. I feel like the height of puberty, maybe. It was a very sexually charged time in my life. So maybe that's why this movie had such an impact on me. I don't know.
It's like we watched you change, like you never
literally changed.
Had wings. Like, I can't say.
One of my favorite vampire movies. It will always be up there for me. I give it like 4 stars out of 5, and I feel like most people rate this like 3 stars, but I love it so much.
I never can remember it. I just always remember Aaliyah and her walk.
Me too.
Like she walks like a tigress.
There's such a cool story with like Marius and this like academic guy, the way that she discovers him because of this academia, understands his like hidden code in the music because she has his diary.
I do not remember that.
It's based off of the Vampire Chronicles. If you watch like Interview with the Vampire and then you watch Queen of the Damned and you make connections to some of these characters, you can really see some of the ideas that they were putting in. Vincent Perez, who played Marius, turns Lestat, and Lestat, if you remember an Interview with the Vampire, turned Louis, and he's kind of villainized or vilified in Interview with the Vampire as this, you know, without conscience kind of vampire. And Marius is very much like that, but like refined. But he still has rules, and like he's like high society vampire. And
are we saying that Lestat's like the Anakin of like vampires?
Yeah.
I know.
We are.
So, like rebellion. I don't want to do it.
Right. It is. Because he's not like in Queen of the Damned, Lestat doesn't have like some good conscience of like killing people. He's killing people just fine, mostly groupies.
In an interview, he says he likes killing people, where Louis says, you don't have to, how can you find the will to do this? He's like, I enjoy doing it.
Yeah, and in Queen of the Damned, I don't think he really touches on whether he enjoys it or not, but he is attracted to Jessica because of her innocence as a human, and he doesn't want to ruin that by turning her, so he tries to scare her away, but he's still like intrigued, so he does disregard that completely and end up turning her anyways. But it's an interesting dynamic, and with the grand scheme of things of the Anne Rice stories, I understand that she doesn't like it, but I see what they were doing with it. I get what they were doing. They were playing like a modern sex and rock and roll theme to a very classic story, whereas Interview with the Vampire was very much a telling almost word for word, like exactly the same theme of what she intended in the first place. So I like.
Do you know what you didn't like about the movie?
I don't know. I never read really into it. I would assume it's the modern sex, rock and roll, and commercialization of it, but I ate it up. Interview with the Vampire was also great. I think Lestat's depiction by Tom Cruise is one of his best performances to date. And the same goes for Brad Pitt. Their like relationship, if we want to talk about what is platonic and not, I think Louis and Lestat have a very
Oh, definitely. No. That's definite. That's canon with Anne Rice. That's canon. In literature, there was the Vampyr that was written before Bram Stoker wrote Dracula, and vampires have existed in different forms and different cultures of folklore where it's really hard to make a direct line. But in literature, it's been kind of like mirrored a fear of immigrants, fear of the other, a fear of women's sexuality, because how dare us, and then it was more often enough about sexual repressed desires.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
letting out the animal. An Interview with a Vampire is definitely not the first, but it's really one of the big popular ones where it's more about Louis' battle with his vampirism and what he has to do as a vampire, that he has to kill people and drink their blood, and and eternal life, and also the Claudia aspect of it all.
Yeah, the child.
Kirsten Dunst was so great.
She was so good in it. I loved her.
Very good. You want to Golden Globe for it?
Yeah, she was so good. I really, really liked Kirsten Dunst playing. She was such a little psycho in the movie. Like, I loved it. She went absolutely batshit in it, and I really appreciated what she did for that role. Honestly, that was
up against Tom Cruise. Like,
scarier than him, I think. I thought it was scarier.
Tom Cruise plays crazy really well. So going up against that, she really stood out.
She shined for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's impressive.
Especially at that age. Yeah, that was very, very good. That was my favorite part of the movie, honestly.
Claudia was my favorite part of the movie.
Interview with a Vampire was done by Neil Jordan, of course, and he ended up doing another vampire movie called Byzantium, which is my personal favorite vampire movie ever. Really close with Bram Stoker's. I constantly toss up which one I like more.
And Queen of the Damned.
Well, Queen of the Damned is definitely nowhere near how great those movies are. I mean, I like Queen of the Damned, but I'm not crazy. Byzantium is very much a similar story as Interview with the Vampire too. If you were to consider, instead of Lestat, you have Gemma Arterton's character, who is a mom and a sex worker, and her daughter, Saoirse Ronan, is more of a Louis character because she's very much reluctant with their ways, what she is, and taking life. Instead, she finds herself as more of a kind of a Grim Reaper character where she finds people who are at the end of their life already and she gives them release.
They want to die.
They want to die, and she makes sure that they choose that they want to die. And so those are the types of people that she takes.
That conversation she had with her teacher is very haunting.
It is.
Yeah.
It's such a fantastic idea. I mean, again, we're talking about a vampire who's chronicling her growing up, but she has to kind of toss the papers to the wind instead of giving it to someone to read because she can't tell her story to protect themselves because they're, running from the law. Which
well,
is
her mother has complete control over her. It feels like her mother feels like she's protecting her daughter, and that's instead of the Lestat Louis romantic relationship or close friendship, however folks want to see it, is the mother-daughter, and she only turned her daughter, correct me if I'm wrong, into a vampire because she was
essayed by someone
and was contracted disease, so she did it to save her life, which was the mother's choice to do it, and then the mother was always choosing when they were going to leave, where they were going to go, what you could tell people to protect her in her mind, but also at some point, of course it took a little longer because they're vampires, and that's the whole thing about the end, is she has to let her daughter go and live her own life.
Yeah, the transformation, like how you become a vampire in this film, is very different than anything I've ever seen. You have to go to a place, it's like a temple that you have to go into, and you become a vampire, kind of like being blessed by some deity of some sort with it. This location of this temple is kept very safeguarded by a brotherhood called the Pointed Nails of Justice.
It's a big patriarch where only us old white men, we know what we're doing, kind of thing. A woman into the tomb. They were upset.
They're the Pointed Nails of Justice, and they do not accept people that aren't in high standing society, and based off of who they choose.
Something I find interesting about this movie is Caleb Landing Jones is in it, who folks might remember from Get Out. He plays the freaky brother in that, and he also is in Brandon Cronenberg's Antiviral. Caleb Landing Jones plays the love interest for the daughter, and he's not a vampire till the very, very end. Spoilers. The very, very end, but he looks like a vampire in real life. No offense, he's like ginger. I'm of the ginger's persuasion. I feel like I can say that. You've got the pale skin. You can see the veins. He's got that. He has a blood disease, correct, in him in the movie, and so he has. But he always looks sickly. It's like, why didn't they take that opportunity to make him a vampire? He looks like a vampire already.
And they do at the end. But one of my favorite scenes happens when revolves around that sickness, because Saoirse Ronan, of course, is a vampire and befriends him, and he cuts himself. And I don't remember if it's he crashes his bike or something and cuts himself with her, and she rushes him home because he won't stop bleeding. And it's ramping up her instincts. She's really into this blood, as it happens with vampires. But she gets him home to safety. The parents are rushing him out, and everything kind of slows in on her face. You can hear the chaos of them getting him into the car going on in the background. And then the minute that they start to drive off, they're not paying attention to her. She picks up the bloody rag off of the ground and just and
it looks so real.
It's so realistic that I've never seen blood goo and ooze like that on screen so realistically.
They did a good job.
Oh, it was so good. But that scene is it's so well done. I have never seen a display of intense focus for a vampire done in that kind of slow motion where you're just looking at their face, and she still manages to be very controlled and ethereal, and you can tell all of her, she's so, I don't know what the word is, she's so restrained. She's a very restrained individual, and there's a lot of juxtaposition between her and a monk style upbringing with this church or orphanage that she was part of. You see a lot of that kind of being tickled into her memory. So you can tell that she has a very like controlled upbringing until she was turned into a vampire.
Yeah.
So you can see that restraint still with her, where she's very monk-like almost, like nun-like.
Yeah, she is very, very much so. There's that whole the scene like with the, what did you call it? The special place that they have to go where all the like birds.
Yeah, the temple.
The temple. I love that. Every time we see that scene with the like red waterfall in behind, I think that's so stunning.
And the bats and birds and stuff coming out.
I think it's beautiful.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so cold too and stark, and like it's got that coastal feel, which I love when like horror films or any type of darker films have some kind of coastal aspect to it, because it just feels cold and like,
because the ocean is terrifying. Yeah.
Well, the whole atmosphere turns gray, and like when you put that against blood, it's just so cool looking thematically and the way it looks on screen. But also the scene right before you see this blood scene I was talking about with the cloth, you also get a really cool scene with Gemma Arterton's character on the beach where she basically kills a pimp, and the way that it's shot, you're very far away and it's this really beautiful wide shot of the beach. You see her like basically kind of flirting. She seduces him to this kind of lonely spot. It looks like she's like making out with him, and then a pillar, you're like walking along this boardwalk almost with these big pillars, and a pillar comes across, and then you see her just like eating his throat. And holding him down. Like, it's
he has
just
a couple really good kills in that movie, like I don't know if it's a cheese wire or whenever she decapitates that guy with the
in the
wire.
Very beginning.
She's got a lot of really
like the
good
reverse penetration, like the female penetrating the male.
It's exactly that. She has a lot of pent-up violence against men, like for good reason based on her upbringing. But it's so cool to see the difference between her and Saoirse Ronan's characters as vampires, because Saoirse Ronan being very restrained, controlled, and a reluctant vampire and very empathetic to humans, whereas Gemma Arterton is like, I make money, I take care of you. All she cares about is her daughter and survival, and she's very unrestrained and vicious.
But she also has like a guy friend that is helpful, but she also kind of likes
super
him too.
Sweet. Like she feels empathy for him because he is nothing like the men that have hurt her in the past.
Well, she's in control,
but he's still disposable, and she still manipulates him.
Oh yeah, but I love Saoirse's character when she's like, she just tells people she's like, oh, she's a vampire.
Yeah,
she's just so open about it.
In her like writing class, she writes her entire story. She's like,
we're supposed to tell a true story.
Yeah. And then when the teachers get involved, their realization is also one of my favorite parts in the movies. Like the one teacher who's with them when the pointed nails of justice do catch up to them, and they're in the car, and she starts to realize that they were telling the truth the whole time. She's like, where are we going? Wait a second. What? Like, and then he snaps her neck.
She should have listened.
Hysterical woman.
That car scene is really, really sad actually, because she's like watching from the back seat and everything, and that's actually a really terrifying moment.
Yeah, it is. This film, it takes you on kind of a really interesting roller coaster that doesn't feel like a roller coaster. Like it's just a beautiful film. So it feels very like through the story, but there's some really like poignant things happening.
And honestly, the ending is quite sad. Like when she like lets her daughter go and stuff. Like
I think that's supposed to be freeing. I see it as freeing because she has to live her own life. It is sad though. She is sad to see her mother go, even though it's what she wanted. But it's bittersweet.
Yeah. I don't like that they separate. I think that they could have been a family together and continued to help each other.
I thought that too. Yeah.
But I think the main point was she realized. Well, she realized. I think that once they caught up to her and her daughter understood the threat, that she had a trust in her now that she should have exposed her to, whereas before it was just her mom saying that there is a threat, and she never lied to her. She told her the full thing. Like the daughter knew that these people existed, but she never believed her mom. Like she looked down on her mom quite a bit and judged her quite a lot. Never gave her mom the credit she deserved for what she had done and how she
typical
protected
teenager.
her. Exactly. Like they're vampires and there's people after them. I think that that's what happened. Is her mom said, okay, well, now you believe me, now you understand. And she also knows that her daughter's smart and understands her daughter well enough that she'll be fine. There's a companion with her. She has a companion. So she said, okay, bye-bye. She's releasing her bat from the nest.
Literally.
Another interesting film, there's two films that kind of, I feel, mirror each other when it comes to vampirism touching upon long-term relationships, whatever the relationship may be. One is the very goth, The Hunger, which starts with Bela Lugosi's Dead by Bauhaus. I mean, it's very 80s. It's very goth. And as a comment on vampirism itself, we all know, Bela Lugosi. And it has David Bowie plays the lover of this countess. She picks her lovers and says, we're going to be together forever. We're going to live as vampires forever. I made you a vampire. But that's not the truth. Truth is, at some point, they become rapidly old within days, within like 2 days, and then they are in a stage of living death where they can't really move, and they're like a corpse that's alive, and she puts them in a coffin, and then she finds a new love. Does not tell them this. And so this movie begins with David Bowie rapidly aging, and she has this young woman, they teach music lessons, this young woman all planned up, but David Bowie messes that up. He kills the girl she had lined up, and Susan Sarandon plays a scientist that is researching aging, and she becomes the new love interest for the countess while David Bowie's nailed in a coffin. The end, it's directed by Ridley Scott's brother, Tony Scott, who did True Romance. There's something about those two brothers and doves, because you think of Blade Runner, the doves that are released at the very end, and the crescendo to the climax, the doves.
Very obvious visual representation of like purity too.
Purity, freedom, and Jesus and the doves. The whole, but I'm getting all excited about the doves. I like doves in movies. There's something visually I like about it, and there's even more doves in The Hunger. At the end of The Hunger,
not doves.
You do expect bats, but at the end of The Hunger, spoilers, Susan Sarandon ends up killing the countess with her own Ankh emblem, and then all the ex-lovers are let out of their coffins, and they come and they crowd her. But then Susan Sarandon, who we think died, she is the new countess, and that's how it goes. And it's very stylistic. It's very 80s. It's very in a way that is more haute couture 80s vibe. It's a very good movie. It's very not very, but a tad avant-garde. I recommend. I mean, David Bowie's in it. That says a lot. A movie that I feel mirrors the opposite of that is Only Lovers Left Alive, where as opposed to people that have been together a very long time and maybe they go tired of each other or it doesn't work out or one is more dominant, it's actually very much about keeping together and the quality of life in a world that you do not like living in, going up with the right partner, even though you're not together all the time, which is Tilda Swinton as Eve and Tom Hiddleston as Adam, and like what a freaking hot couple they are.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and they target couples, which I love. like you could tell that they have a lot of like upset with love in general because they've been with it for so long and they've fallen out of it almost. Like they're apathetic to love, and that's what drives their choices.
I feel they're apathetic to having to live. This is just my opinion. To living in the world, like so Tom Hiddleston's character is trying to kill himself with this special bullet or whatever, and she finds out that he's going to do this. They're not living together at the time because you don't always need to live together all the time, especially when you live forever. But I feel, and then she goes to aid him, and she kind of helps him realize that the parts of this world that are worth living, because he's saying the world is getting even worse.
So
becoming even worse.
What I mean is like they're apathetic to human love.
Oh yeah, totally.
That's what I mean. Like they target couples because what humans think is love is frivolous to them. It's not like the love that they understand and know. It's not the lifetimes that they've lived. It's
but not in a way that's pretentious. It's just like, when you lived longer, more. It's just the way it is.
Right. That's why I think it's so interesting, because they come across as very well knowing, but at the same time, like completely disregarded with life. At this point, what is there to learn? What is there to do that we haven't done? They're very like sad. But not
I gotta say,
that's what I mean by like apathetic. Like they're just apathetic characters.
Like Tom Hiddleston has this amazing guitar collection in it, and I'm like, dude, I'll take that guitar collection anytime.
They're like understated cool because they just don't care, and they're like the perfect visual representation of that.
It's like if the couple from The Hunger were more so mutual and in love, and that's the use of that vampirism in the
and I think that The Hunger was really interesting because this was another theme of the 80s that was really popular, to like tie some sort of scientist who's trying to understand the same thing that like is going on in the film, who just happens to come across what's going on, and that's why they're thrust
lots of scientists, lots of journalists. That's a big thing.
Scientists and journalists. Yeah, anybody who would. Yeah, exactly.
I have to check out both of these movies because I haven't seen either of those.
They're both real. I
haven't seen The
Lovers
Hunger in
Left
a long
Alive
time.
first. That one is it's a little bit either one. They're very different, but I think they both touch upon being in a relationship with someone for a very long time. And there's
some like heavy themes and very slow burn. That's what I would say with Only Lovers.
So The Hunger, it's very slow in the beginning and then speeds up. So in the beginning, if you're like, this is taking freaking forever, it gets faster.
Well, they both sound interesting, so I'll definitely check them out one day.
I think that you do like a particular movie that gives me the same kind of vibe, which is A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. I feel like that gives me this similar vibe to Only Lovers Left Alive.
Oh, well, that's good to know, because
in like artistic style, I guess, if that makes sense. Like it's very art house.
But she intentionally made it to be like, which I have to admit I'm completely ignorant to. I just know that from an interview with her, is that it's supposed to be like new wave cinema of Iranian films, which happened just before the revolution, which happened in 78, I believe, when they had the revolution there. So it's like 1964 to 1978. That I'm totally ignorant to. A mix of that, and again, as I said earlier with Lost Boys, they wanted to make it like Rebel Without a Cause. This is another movie where Rebel Without a Cause comes up, James Dean. So a combination of the new wave Iranian cinema and 50s teen movies. Because you can see that James Dean-ness in him, can't you? Can't you see like this 50s greaser?
Yeah.
The way he dresses with the white t-shirt.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that movie is stunning in so much. Like, just I swear every scene just completely captivated me in that movie. And I love how she's just like this sad, like skateboarding vampire. Like, she's
has like a noir vibe to it.
That does.
And with like a little hipster vampire.
Definitely got a hipster vibe for sure.
Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes in the whole movie is when she takes him back to her house and there's a disco ball and he spins it really fast, and just like the lighting, and then there's like the music playing, and I love that part. So I was literally mesmerized watching that whole scene. There's even like little scenes where he's like poking his eggs with a fork, and just like the lighting and the shadows and like I don't know what it is. Like there's just like little beautiful scenes that like don't really necessarily mean a lot to the story, but I was just drawn into them because they're so beautiful. That whole movie just makes me, I don't know.
Something I love about her character that not a lot of female characters get the luxury of is she can be really brutal, where she kills a homeless man for like no reason, like she's not even desperate for blood, or her meanest little boy, which makes a little more sense. Then she can also be extremely tender, how tender she is with him, and how tender she is with the sex worker. So she can be very brutal but also very tender, and she's a very nuanced character, which I think mirrors the cloak she has, which symbolizes this idea of male patriarchy protecting women and we only showing the eyes, which makes me think about Lugosi, how they center in on his eyes.
That's what gave me the noir feel too. Yeah. Because it's black and white and there's that like eye focus.
So it cloaks that she's conforming to this male patriarchy, but she's really a predator. She's the apex predator, and it looks like a vampire's cape. It's like this perfect mixture of symbolism and visual style, and that's like the movie as a whole. It's great.
I was gonna say the whole movie is very much like that. Yeah. I mean, so many scenes. I don't know how they filmed it, but it's filmed where like what they're focused on is extremely like sharp and focused on, but the background is so blurry. I don't know if you guys noticed. I don't know that it's a certain type of way of filming. I don't know what it's called though, but like
I think maybe it's what do they call that when it's 1 point perspective, when something is very much in focus and the rest is.
Yeah, it's like extremely blurry, like almost to the point where it almost makes it look like there's people in the background, or like because you can't tell what it is because it's so blurred out. And like the lighting and everything is also they put a lot of work into like how the movie looked, and even the score, like the music that they chose for that one, very interesting choices too.
Fantastic score. And I like how Bad City, where it takes place, is it's Iran and America. It's both and neither.
Yeah, it's like
at the same time, and commenting on both, like how it's inspirations from Iranian New Wave, which I gotta get more into that because I gotta say I don't know much much about it.
Yeah.
And the American teen 50s movie.
Yeah. Well, and I also have to say the cat in that movie, at the end, especially when it's sitting on the back seat of the car and it's just this fat little chunk in the middle of the whole shot. That's my favorite. I love that
the
scene.
cat. That's such a big cat.
So fat, so chunky.
I love fat cat.
Me too.
I love her character a lot. And I think you touched on it quite well, Emma, with how she is an apex predator amongst where she is not portrayed as a predator at all, but more or less either a child or a girl, just a child. And she's not. She's very much like the thing to watch out for at night. I think that another vampire film that does that really well is Let the Right One In, with the way that they have this little girl who you think is being taken care of by some old man who's her father. The way that relationship is just kind of in that film, just it rocked me.
There's a bit more to it in that. When I first saw Let the Right One In, the original Swedish film, and then saw the Let Me In, which is the American version. And with both versions, my assumption was that her father character was someone she met when he was, it was never said. I just assumed that he was somebody she met when he was a little boy and that he just grew into
yeah.
But
I think that's exactly what happened.
It's not. The original book, which the author of the book wrote the screenplay. And there's a lot of this that I didn't catch in the Swedish version that is alluded to, that is almost erased in the American version. And I like the American version. It's just different.
I remember the American version more.
He's a castrated little boy. He is a forced castrated little boy, or he named Elias, who before he was turned into a vampire, that happened. And we even see it physically. How did I miss that? We even see the scar right there in the movie. And I'm like, how did I miss that the first time?
Yeah.
And the character that plays her, fake dad isn't somebody she knew as a kid. He's a pedophile she picked up, who used to be a teacher, which they don't say in the movie at all. Okay, you wouldn't know if you didn't read the book. I kind of like the idea better that she knew him as a little boy and that he just kind of grew into this mentor and that she always found a replacement. But that's
how I interpreted it.
And a lot of the movie is like, and even in the American version where he says, I really like you, do you want to go steady? She's like, what if I wasn't a little girl? She says that in all of them, and we assume that means because she's a vampire, so she's lived for a long time, so she's not necessarily a little girl, but it's really that she was originally castrated little boy that presented as a girl. And I think that is not true in the American version, but once I found that out, the fact that Oscar, the little boy, our main character who's bullied, he has more internal issues with her originally being a boy than her being a vampire. And so it's a lot of has to do with that. But once I knew that, I completely saw it in the Swedish version.
Yeah, I could see that in the Swedish version for sure. I do not catch that in the American version is not like that at all.
They take a lot out of it, just like Fright Night, which we'll get into.
And for sure it is that he was a boy that she picked up, not a pedophile. The whole point of the film, which made it really dark to me and really cool, is this whole time you're thinking that this guy is like her caretaker, kind of Renfield. It's a Renfield-esque character, only he is not happy to take care of her at all. It's not that he's just frustrated with her like a father to, it's not like he's frustrated with her like a father to child though. It is that he is frustrated with her because he basically was manipulated into this role. And she never cared for him the way that he has always cared for her and always will, including when he killed himself. And he does kind of kill himself in the new one.
And he disfigures himself in every version. He puts the acid that he was going to put on the when he gets caught, so his face is distorted, so they can't trace back to her.
And I feel like that it wasn't just that. I feel like he would never have done that unless he knew that she had a replacement and that he knew that she had.
He was jealous in the Swedish version. He was jealous, like, please don't go see that boy.
He was much more feeling like he was trying to push this boy away, like he didn't want to happen to him what happened to him.
I felt like it was jealousy, like I don't want him to replace me. I felt that like it was that in the Swedish. I haven't seen the American.
I felt a lot of resentment from. No, I'm talking about the American version. The American version. I saw
that more recently. So
I saw the American one more recently, and I don't remember the differences between the two.
I don't either. I got to be honest. I do remember that they take pretty much all of the trans and gay stuff completely out of the American version. The relationship between the little boy and the little girl is amazing. amazing.
Too.
It's
So
still
good.
a very good movie. It does take that away, but it still is it's one of the better American remakes. And I'm not a big fan of, like, why do we have to do that? But that is one of the better ones.
I felt very tricked with Let Me In. I felt like I was watching a girl care for a boy out of empathy and friendship. And what I ended up witnessing was a girl manipulate a boy and be a predator the entire time and take advantage of his insecurities and the fact that he was bullied, looking for friendship, looking for connection. She took advantage of that in order to find a new caretaker. That's dark.
It is dark, and in the Swedish version, I feel like she does care for Oscar a little bit more. But one of the coolest scenes that's more vampy related is Oscar's a little mad at her, and she comes to see him in his apartment. She's like, you have to invite me in. He's like, well, what if I don't?
Mm-hmm.
What if I don't? What's going to happen? And she crosses the line of the doorway, and she starts bleeding from all of her orifices. And he's like, I let you in. Okay, you can come in. And it's like, it's a very, like, I've never seen that actual play with vampirism. Usually it's just, they just can't come in. So it also seemed like a little bit of a sacrifice she made, whether it's to really get his faith more, or she actually kind of cares. I think she feels sorry for him. I think there's that, but it is a little bit.
Yeah, like a predator feels sorry for its prey.
Oh, not that bad. I think it's like not sorry enough where it actually counts, I guess. But you do feel it in the moment.
I've never seen the American version, so I need to check it out, but I've only seen the Swedish one, and I really like it.
Do you remember the scene where we see her scar?
I don't, though. I haven't. I did watch it fairly recently, but I didn't catch on to that at all.
It's around the end when he stays at her place, and she's like in the other room, and he sees her changing, and it's this scar. Although it looks like veins, so it's like I guess probably the first time I watched it, I probably thought of it as she's a vampire, so maybe she doesn't have a gender. So maybe
a little bit more mystical, like an angel. Well, speaking of angels and vampires, I think we need to touch on Midnight Mass.
We did touch on Midnight Mass in our Mike Flanagan episode, so you guys can go watch that. This is one of my favorite things that Mike Flanagan has ever done.
Me too.
It's actually just behind Haunting of Hill House for me. I think Midnight Mass was absolutely stunning. You know, one of my favorite things about this being a vampire series is that they never once mention the word vampire in it. It's very like elusive, like you don't actually know exactly. It's meant to, well, they kind of refer to it as an angel, as you said.
Did not see it coming.
Neither did I. And that like those final episodes, I was like, what? What is going on?
Once you realize, it's just like after that, like you just start getting rocked every moment.
Totally. Like I remember,
so cute how we thought that was gonna be good from that. It's like,
I know.
It's like it's kind of like a sign of his desperation of wanting something to come, and also vanity.
Yeah.
He's a good guy, but we all have our flaws.
I had no clue this was a show about vampires at all. So once you find out that reveal, like, oof, it is nuts, man, and it is so impactful. I thought this was a show about like revival. I thought it was going to be about some sort of like religious strange things happening. You don't know who's healing who, but vampires, no idea.
I didn't either. I had no clue.
Every review that I made about that show when it came out, because I watched it like that, I kept telling people, do not get spoiled. Go watch this show. It'll get spoiled for you. One word, and that word was vampire. That would spoil the experience of the show, because one of the best things about it was not knowing it was about vampires.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry if you haven't seen it and you're watching us now.
Spoiler alert. I binged the series the day it came out. I binged the whole thing in one day.
Me too.
And I was completely stunned and floored. The scene with Riley and Aaron.
in the boat.
Riley and Aaron in the boat.
Oh, that's my favorite scene. It's so sad.
So my God. Done. So
beautiful and sad.
I cannot give enough credit to Mike Flanagan for that series, because it was,
and the creature design was so good, and he was very inspired, obviously, by Salem's Lot and Nosferatu. In Salem's Lot, before Midnight Mass, Salem's Lot was probably my favorite show depicting like a scary vampire experience. And
that vampire at the window.
Yeah, and it's so scary. I find Salem's Lot to be very creepy, and I feel like Mike Flanagan definitely hit that beautifully. Like it's difficult to do, especially because is us as an audience nowadays are not surprised by vampire stories. And they're not very scary to us because they're so close to human, but at the same time so far removed from reality. It's hard for us to connect to it. And the way he got us to connect to everything going on before revealing a vampire, like we know something's happening, we think it's a monster or some evil entity, but we have no clue it's a vampire. And I felt like that was just what made it so great and scary, because it's really the people on the
really get to know that community really well before anything really serious happens.
Right. Whereas Salem's Lot, I feel like was just scary. Like that was just classic Stephen King scary vampire.
I always love seeing the Max Schreck vampire come back.
Exactly. And I think Nosferatu was one of my favorite things to learn about when I was in high school history of films class. We talked about Nosferatu a lot. And I still find the design of and the use of shadows to be like so classic vampire. Like I would be very disappointed if I watched a vampire movie and there wasn't something that's paying homage to Nosferatu, whether it's the shadow on the walls, the hands, the
hands. I love
the reaching hands, which they do in Dracula and Bram Stoker's Dracula. That kind of stuff needs to be touched on, I think, in vampire films. Give me a little hint.
It's the post World War I German expressionist film, 1992's Nosferatu. They called it that because they didn't have the rights to vampire to Dracula, and they still got in trouble with Bram Stoker's widow because she was still alive at the time. It's not that long ago that Dracula was written.
Right.
It's crazy to think of that. But that German expressionist look is amazing. There was a lot of criticism about the look of the vampire because it's that old stereotype of what anti-Semites would draw Jewish people looking like, and what a lot of modern audiences talk about. Like, how did people not get upset at J.K. Rowling's Goblin? The old cartoons. And Monroe, the director, was not an anti-Semite. I really love that look of the vampire. It's very scary. There was even an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode where the vampire came out of the canister. It was that type of vampire. Yeah. Then we see that type of vampire again in Werner Herzog, Nosferatu, with guy from Jurassic Park.
Sam Neill.
With Sam, the very cute, very handsome Sam Neill playing Jonathan Harker. Klaus Kinski, the infamously talented, infamously piece of garbage, Klaus Kinski playing Nosferatu. There was a rumor that Max Schreck, the actor who played the original Nosferatu, was actually a vampire because he was a very odd looking dude and kind of had an odd life a little bit. He obviously wasn't a vampire.
Well, we know of. Allegedly.
Shadow of the Vampire with
Willem
Dafoe playing Max Schreck and John Malkovich playing the director Monroe, and the theory that Max Schreck was a vampire and only John Malkovich as the director knows that, and the whole crew is just getting hints of all this weirdness going on.
It's so funny.
Wait a minute, where did you find this guy again? Where did you find him? And but another interesting thought about that mirroring Werner Herzog's version is that instead of a woman, he's kind of grieving and missing and reminiscing the idea of being human, and especially in a monologue where he talks about missing the idea of eating a meal and tasting a meal. It's an interesting take on that. But Sam Neill was another vampire thing.
Yes, Sam Neill was in Daybreakers with Ethan Hawke. That is such a cool modern vampire film where vampires are everywhere and they're actually running out of humans to eat. Human blood, because the people are either being turned or killed. The human population is in decline, basically. So they're looking for ways to either find ways to manufacture human blood, but the blood that is being basically diluted to a point where they're starting to be very beastly instead of normal.
The vampires are very scary in that one. There's not a
well, they're very human, actually. They're very normal, but they're turning beastly and scary because the blood is not quality anymore. And it's causing them to be much more like strigoi, right? And that like the classic.
That was a real for the word vampire was really a big thing. That was I think it was a Slavic creature that was either it inhabited a person of the dead and came back that had a certain agency as opposed to a zombie.
You see the terms used a lot, like the different like folklore around vampirism being used a lot with different ways to name like types of vampire. And like so like Vampire Academy, they have the strigoi, which are like the like mindless, beastly, like vicious and super strong like vampires, and then they have like the more like nicer ones, which I can't remember what they're called. Anyways,
I haven't seen
in Daybreakers, they're like trying to find, you know, a fix for this problem that they have. And at some point, Ethan Hawke discovers a way to be cured of vampirism.
He's good at figuring things out, Ethan Hawke.
That is a problem. So it's a very cool story. I think it's very just cool.
There's a movie that we all have seen that I was trying to think of a movie where the vampires aren't sexy at all, where they're just scary. And one that really comes to mind is 30 Days of Night.
Okay, I don't want to say I have an issue with vampire movies because that's not it. I actually really like a lot of vampire movies, but so many vampire movies, even though they're part of the horror genre, they're not scary. And that's why I really like 30 Days of Night, because they are a lot scarier. I will give credit to Nosferatu though, because Count Orlok is honestly terrifying, but
Fingers, man.
those fingers, yeah. 30 Days a Night, they are scary and they're vicious, and I like that in a horror movie because it puts you a little bit more on edge. And also like Josh Hartnett, I mean, I love him.
And I love Melissa George too. She was in Triangle.
She was in Triangle, yeah.
That one's good.
We hardly ever see like a really brutal vampire movie in that sense, where it's like it's very brutal and very dangerous. And I think they're the scariest vampires I've seen.
And there's zero desire to want to become one, which is something that is very different. I feel like I get really upset sometimes with vampire movies where they like, I don't want to become a vampire, I don't want to become a monster, but they're like hot and they're like really cool. It's like
they live forever.
I would love to be one. What's wrong with you?
Like they're just kind of having.
I would even be a lost boy.
Yeah, honestly.
I'd love to be a lost boy. Come on.
Yeah.
Make me a lost boy.
I also love like the play on the like Alaskan darkness and like how that's tied into the story. It's so cool. And like the isolation you get is very reminiscent of The Thing. And there's a few other
It's like 28 Days Later in a way that like I feel like those came out around the same time where they just made usual monsters we had more dangerous.
Yeah, totally. You know, I think you'd really like Stakeland for sure, Crystal, because that one you do not want to be a vampire. They're not a good thing at all. They're like a post-apocalyptic plague on mankind, and they're scary. And that's a much more scarier version of the vampire. It's very reminiscent of 30 Days Night, except for
I have to definitely check it out because I don't want people to take that the wrong way. Like I do every vampire movie that I've watched, I rate it very well because I actually think vampire movies are always done very beautifully.
I feel like they land easy.
Yeah, they do. But sometimes when I'm wanting a horror movie, I tend to not choose vampire movies because more often than not, there's little horror elements in them.
Well, we need to add a lot of sexy to it. That's why.
Yeah,
right.
And honestly, that's fine. That's fine.
And I think people see it.
Particular film that does sexy and scary.
Oh my God. Does it ever?
It is scary. There's like body parts. There's crazy transformations. Selma Hayek.
I was gonna say, like, if we're gonna talk about sexy and scary, From Dusk Till Dawn is probably one of the best vampire movies for that because Salma Hayek was insane, like so good. But yeah, the vampires in it, when they do transform and stuff, they are creepy. They're definitely spooky little vampires.
Salma Hayek's body is more unreal to me. Like, wow, is a woman that beautiful that exists? Oh,
yeah,
it's incredible. She's a goddess for sure.
She literally was.
You kind of have to ignore a little bit of the Tarantino foot fetish thing in that film because looking back on hindsight, it's a little creepy.
He's creepy in general in that whole movie.
I feel like the inclusion of that is very like rotten. You know you have a foot fetish and you're basically subjecting someone who's acting for you to your foot fetish on film. Like we know.
Yeah.
We know Tarantino. Stop.
That's why I could describe to you what's her name from Clerks and Rosario Dawson. I could draw her feet after Death Race.
Death Proof.
Death Proof.
Yeah, for sure. Once you get past that, Salma Hayek's entire performance, gorgeous. And then the transformation to like lizard vampire. It was such a cool, because it goes nuts after that. I mean, and she is pandemonium, right? So it becomes
shout out to Grace Jones that did it first in Vamp, the dance and the transformation.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
It's very it's not the best vampire movie, but it's artsy.
I also love like when things kick off in From Dusk Till Dawn and it gets crazy, the music is still playing and then they cut back to the band and they're just like playing body parts and
there's like a body guitar.
Guys, the saxophone is like a human spine with a head and the head is like making the it's crazy.
Well, the first time I ever watched From Dusk Till Dawn, I had no idea that there was going to be that epic vampire twist because the first hour of the movie is like these guys being bad guys. Like that's
what
a
crime thriller,
fugitive, like heist film. Yeah,
exactly. And
trying to get to Mexico, right?
Exactly. And you don't expect that on that first watch. You don't expect the vampire twist, and that just it elevated that movie so much for me. Like it was automatically like a 5 out of 5 for me. Like I love everything about that movie. Every little
Robert Rodriguez.
It's so intense that it was like with the whole drama with Juliette Lewis and Harvey Keitel. You're very enthralled, and it's very intense. And when you don't expect, like, I feel bad for people that know that it's a vampire movie because when you don't expect it to all of a sudden become a vampire movie, it's like this is one of the best.
Huge tone change. Yeah, it's a huge tonal shift. The minute that
huge shout out to Sex Machine, Tom Savini.
Tom Savini.
His wiener gun.
Yeah, his wiener gun.
I love it.
I love it too. Again, like Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez are damn near satirical. Like this is like it's almost like a joke. Like it's like watching some really wealthy and funny and well like connected friends make a ridiculous movie.
Oh yeah.
And it works almost every time.
Like, it's completely bonkers, but I freaking love it.
Yeah, it's right in line to me with like self-aware meta horror.
But, there's also a really sad storyline, like with her, like Juliette Lewis's character watching her dad get bit and then her brother having to kill him, and then like there's so many sad parts to that movie.
It was refreshing at the end that George Clooney wasn't a creep and didn't take advantage of Juliette Lewis at all.
He just had a crazy brother who would.
Because he said he's a bastard, but he's not a fucking bastard.
Yeah, like that's like thank God that happens sometimes because
another like that sexy anti-hero character. I love it. I hate that I love it, but I love it.
Me too, honestly. But I love it, and I actually really like his character at the end.
I do too.
Definitely my favorite George Clooney role.
Me too.
Mine too.
Me too.
Yeah.
Another film that around vampires that is also satirical in nature that I adore and does not get enough credit because a certain television show overshadowed it. Buffy was like this film I loved when I was younger, like young, and I watched it a lot. It was one of my favorites. I remember the cheer, how funky is your chicken? How funky is your chicken? How loose is your goose? Goose is totally loose. Like I remember that whole dance. I loved that film, and I think that Christy Swanson, I feel like she's a little off the rocker now, but she was so great in this movie and cool. Hilary Swank was in it. I feel like this is like one of her earlier films.
Definitely.
And I also never expected to ever feel like I'd ever be attracted to Paul Rubens in anything. And we've talked about this before, I think, on the show. I love Paul Rubens in this movie. This ridiculous death scene that is one of my favorite deaths in horror of all time. Also, look, I don't like Joss Whedon. I think he's a horrible human being, but I'm so glad that he wrote Buffy.
Me too.
So glad.
Did he write the movie too?
He wrote the movie and the show. So I believe
I
believe he actually did not like the movie, or he didn't like how it was received and some of the directing choices. He felt like it wasn't taken. I don't think he felt it was taken seriously enough.
Yeah.
And some of the things that he wanted kind of got taken out, which probably for good reason, which is why he ended up creating the show.
My favorite.
Which was beloved.
Which is also beloved. But again, you can, knowing what we know about Joss Whedon today, you can look back at some of his work and see the problems.
Yeah. For sure. Sometimes I feel bad liking Buffy still, but it was such a pivotal show for me growing up that like I'm separating the art and the artist on this one because like Buffy meant so much to me growing up. I wanted to be Buffy. Like, and I'm talking about from the series, not from the movie. Sarah Michelle Gellar Buffy, to me, she was friggin' iconic. She was so strong. I would go outside and like teach myself martial arts and like punch and kick fake things. Like I loved her. I wanted to be her. So I have to, even though Joss Whedon's a dink, I'm just gonna
there's a lot of primary writers that were on that show too that weren't fans of Whedon people that worked with him, so you can't really, it's easy to separate it. I think there's some good stories. The Scooby Gang, I like this. I don't know Buffy as well, but I like the Scooby Gang aspect to it.
And if we were to remove every problematic director and work and thing of our past, we would have no cool female characters that we love. And that's what's unfortunate about the lack of access women have had historically to the industry, is now we're having to reevaluate some of these characters that represented us because of the people who created them. And I'm not going to have that. I'm not going to have them take away some of our strong female characters like Buffy because Joss Whedon was problematic. Like, forget it. What I took from that was important. What I got from Buffy was important, regardless of what problems Joss Whedon had, which I think that one of the characters I actually hate the most was modeled after him. So there we go.
Xander?
There you go.
That's Xander. So
it's interesting that Buffy is like a female yesified Van Helsing. It's like, let's take Van Helsing, the vampire hunter, and let's make him a teenage girl. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool. I loved it. And it came at a very important time in my life.
It did for me too, honestly. Like, it was one of the first shows that started getting me into like the more spooky things, and it introduced me to vampires. And I don't know, it was just, like I said, it was pivotal for my life growing up. So
I had a huge sexual awakening because of Buffy too. Elisha Dusk was one of my first crushes.
Oh yeah.
First women crushes.
Yeah.
What character did that person play?
Faith. She played Faith.
Oh, Faith. Okay, yeah, she's the hot one.
I liked her too, actually. She was also a strong character. She had that sassy, like, badass vibe to her.
Yeah, and if you look back, she wasn't nearly as bad as I remember.
No.
Another strong female vampire world that I love is Underworld, which I know she's like hypersexualized and very she's wearing like latex. I love Celine so much.
It's fun to look at. I have never seen it, but it's fun to look at.
There is such a cool scene of her, like your introduction to her, where she jumps from a building and lands and just walks, and it is handled so well that it is forever one of the coolest scenes in the world.
Is it primarily about the war between vampires and werewolves? Is that
yes. Vampires and lichens.
Why are they at war?
So you find that out in Rise of the Lycans.
You find it out on the worst one? Like, they don't tell you why they're mad at each other?
That one is fantastic, and it primarily stars Michael Sheen.
I'm not dissing it. I haven't seen it. I can't. I love the faith. I cannot diss a movie I have not seen. But I'm just curious. I don't know. Like, what is the vampirism spin of it? Like, what does it say about vampirism?
So vampires and lichens are at war, and you find out where the origin of that came from, and it's mostly around classism. It's all based on classism. Like, vampires were rich and had a lot of money, and they enslaved the lichens to do their bidding. Thought very less of them.
Bad ones.
But you find out that vampires and werewolves are both good and bad. Like, they all have their own problems. You find out that their war between each other, that's like centuries old, was built off of some pretty bad stuff. Like, the vampires are not as good as they like to paint themselves, but they're the victors of history, so that their history is written by them. And that's what your protagonist, Celine, is discovering. I love the Underworld series. I think that a lot of these films, Underworld and Blade, I love Blade too. I think they all get a bad rap because they're action horror. They came out in a time when that was really cool and popular. Oh yeah. A lot of people think that these are.
A lot of people like Underworld too. I haven't. That's because I'm a person that hasn't seen it. I get it recommended a lot. There's a lot of love for that, for both of them. I mean, especially Blade 2.
I don't think they're regarded as like good film though. I think
it's like Dracula 2000, even though it has 7 of 9 in it. Go from a Trekkies. You know? Yeah,
let's talk about Dracula 2000, because yes, it is also considered not a great film, and I love it. I love a lot of really I call them cotton candy films where you know that they're not like there's no like
films.
great revolutionary like filmmaking happening here. It's catering to a specific audience, and I am that audience. I am someone who
It's like a
gobbles
party
up.
or an amusement park ride. It's fun.
Yeah, and I gobble it up. I love it. I just like I love Marvel and I love action films. Dracula 2000 had Gerard Butler playing Dracula, and it had a really cool tie to like religion and Judas. I mean, watch it. It's really cool. I don't think it's a bad one. I think it's a fun one. Very, very much 2000. Yeah.
Sorry, I get like it's bad. I'm like, thank goodness I don't go to church because I'd be just hearing Lady Gaga in my head. Daughters of Darkness, which my family is primarily Flemish, and it's a Flemish vampire movie. It's very much very gay. An older woman meets this couple. They name her Elizabeth Bath. Count.
Is it more gay than lesbian vampires or whatever you call it?
No. Vampiros Lesbos is a Jesus Franco movie, a very sexual director. That's a whole. It's more psychedelic. It's almost a porn, but it's not. It's worth. Of all the exploitation movies of vampire lesbianism that are more just visual fun than anything else, that's the one to watch. Is Jesus Franco's.
I know they're problematic, but I still love those too.
But Daughters of Darkness is different than that. It actually it's not an exploitation movie in that sense. And the Countess encounters this couple, and she really wants female this character, but she steals every scene. She's played by Delphine Seyrig, and she's in her 40s. She's got like this cut face, she's blonde, and so the Lady Gaga connection is she's basically an older version of Lady Gaga's character in American Horror Story, The Countess. It's like these yeah. I don't think that's the name of the character in American Horror Story because I'm not.
No, but that is what she's based on too.
Yeah, and it's these lavish outfits, this very kind of refined manner, and that's my Lady Gaga connection to vampirism. And I do recommend Daughters of Darkness. It is a good movie. It's not one of those. It's not. There is some sexy things in it, but it's not about that. It actually is about the relationship and certain types of manipulation. And it's fun.
That's kind of the big themes around thirst too, right?
Yes.
And thirst. Park Chan-wook is one of my favorite. He's in my top 13 of fantastic directors of horror. He is
just
phenomenal. It's just fantastic. It's a really cool vampire story. And it has such a cool atmosphere. And
it has a lot of fun moments.
It does. And that main actor that he's in a lot of
he's in Host.
Yeah, he's so
which is not done by that director. It's a different director. But it's interesting because he's a preacher, like Midnight Mass, but he is kind of a slight crisis of faith, and in that he becomes a test subject for an experiment where they're trying to cure this disease called Emmanuel disease, I believe. It wasn't a real disease, but you get blisters all over your face. And part of the experiment, they put vampire blood in him, which he did not know they were going to do that. He did not know that. He comes out of it alive and bandaged, and he's seen as like a saint, that he's survived this. And people are kind of worshiping him, which kind of doesn't help his emotional status.
Yeah.
And then he finds out through drinking blood, the blisters on his face go away. And that's how it begins. Mm-hmm. But that's not where it gets thirsty. Where does it get thirsty, guys? Where does it get thirsty?
Well, the same way things get thirsty for me, with a girl.
With a girl. Who's awesome in this movie.
She's the scary one.
She's so good. Oh.
Her laugh and the way when she has that evil look in her face. She's very good. Very good.
It's something I really love about South Korean acting is they're very expressive and they really lean in with stuff, and it's nothing like the way American actors are. It's why I love, I think, a lot of South Korean horror is the way that they act and the way that they're so expressive with their faces and their voice, their tones. And she's just phenomenal in that. And so is he. They're both really great at that.
South Korean has some of the best horror, honestly. And
totally.
This one I actually thought was going to be a little bit more on the horror side. And then it brought in a lot of comedy to the movie. Like when he jumps off the building onto the car and his head gets stuck in the windshield. I was laughing so hard because I didn't expect it. It caught me off guard, and I was like, oh, so this movie is going to go that way. Like, so it had a lot of really fun aspects to it that it's very
slapstick.
It's so slapstick.
And one of the most well done in a way that really bothers me because it's one of my things. That is the sound design when it comes to vampirism, in the sense that there's a lot of very sexual scenes in this between these two characters.
Yeah.
And they are sucking every part, like the feet. Like we see a lot of feet sucking, a lot of armpit sucking. It's all over the body, but they're like enough for me to say there's a lot of armpit sucking in this. And the noise, I can't stand the noise of other people suckling on things or eating. I can't stand it.
I can't either.
They also like hyper focused on the sound. Like they like turned up that volume on it.
They did. I think they wanted it to get to you in a way that was supposed to be disturbing, but also funny.
Yeah, I think that that was like their way of displaying how animalistic this is, and it's not a good cool thing again.
I've never been all up in someone's armpit like that. You know what? I'm not. No judgments that those that are. You know, maybe I'm missing out, but I'll miss out on
there.
That
there is. Have you been on TikTok Live at all? Because like I get. Let's get that armpit shot.
Honestly, one of the grossest parts of that movie for me was when they're getting it on and her like dead husband is like soggy and wet.
Yes,
pouring out of his face, and he's like in between them with the rock. I was so weirded out by that whole scene. Like that part got me, but his goopiness.
Because they both see him and they just keep going, like ignore it.
Yeah. He's just so wet and.
So he has like goofy look on his face.
Yeah. Oh.
There isn't a lot of goopiness that is usually associated with vampire films, actually. So that kind of like that type of gore is not typical of a vampire film. Vampire films are usually very sexy and very like even when they're scary, there's still some like rock star sex appeal going on in the background. Like even with Stakeland, like you're following a very like lone wolf character, so like there's still this air of sexy badassery going on.
Near Dark is another one.
Yeah, Near Dark is another one, a very good example actually, and so is John Carpenter's vampires. I mean, they all have that, but there's never real goop. And even in John Carpenter's,
I'd say there isn't that sexy rock star. I think it's more terrifying. No.
Yeah. Well, there's gore, even in like From Dusk Till Dawn, there is body parts, there's gore, there's blood and guts and like things. There's blood. There's always blood, but there's never really goop. Like it's never
disappointing if there was no blood.
You associate that with more like zombie movies, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of zombie movies, we're going to be talking about zombie movies on our next episode.
Get ready for it.
Super excited about.
We're going to talk some sadness. We're going to talk about some sadness, which we haven't seen yet. So
we have not.
We're waiting.
I'm preparing myself for it.
I am too.
Even there's a lot of comedic elements in a lot of vampire movies, including Thirst. I think that's universally known. The best vampire comedy is What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah.
My favorite.
The movie and the show.
Yes.
That movie is phenomenal. It makes me laugh so hard. Like so hard. Down to just the dumb lines. Like, we're werewolves, not swearwolves. Like, I love it so much. There's so many good lines.
Them trying to figure out what business casual was.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my God. I love it. You're right.
I think it's one of my favorite, one of my top horror comedies in general.
Me too.
And I kind of combine the show and the movie. I love Nadia.
Nadia. Love the what is the vampire that like sucks the life out of people? Like
the psychic vampire.
Oh my God, he's so funny. I love all the characters that come out of the What We Do in the Shadows franchise, I guess now. They're all like iconic.
Let's have more of Jackie Daytona, regular human bartender.
Yeah, they're all like classic vampire trope, but they're all inclusive in this show and in the film where they like touch on all of them. Like, because you have the Nosferatu vampire who gets, accidentally killed, which is also funny.
By sunlight.
By sunlight, because someone left like the curtains open or something. It's so funny. Yeah, Taika Waititi is a genius. He's hilarious.
So they're all just so funny.
He's like legitimately funny. Like it's not just a thing that he knows how to write.
I know. I was a fan of Flight of the Conchords, so I knew him from Flight of the Conchords originally. So I was already a huge fan because I love the hip hop eponymous. I love that whole show. So it's the movie more so than the show carries on that New Zealand type of humor that I was introduced through Flight of the Conchords, which he was a big part of.
Jermaine Clement.
Yes, Jermaine.
Yeah, Jermaine Clement he's also really funny. I think he's been really funny in a lot of movies. And they both directed it. Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement both wrote and directed What We Do in the Shadows together.
That makes it cooler.
Yeah. Taika Waititi's Viago. He's my favorite, but Jermaine Clement is Vlad, right?
Yes.
Vladislav.
My favorite. My personal.
He does an amazing David Bowie impression. It's like spot on. It's a Flight of the Conchords.
Yeah, I love how he's like this like sexual being in the movie, but he's so ridiculous. Like I would find him so goofy in real life, but I wouldn't be attracted to him.
Oh, I would.
But it's so funny how like attracted people are to him. I don't know. The way he like you don't believe him at first. You don't believe that people are actually attracted to him, that he can get women and stuff. Like you find it ridiculous.
Well, all of us could look like Colin Farrell.
But he does. He pulls women in this movie and it's so funny to me.
He probably pulls women in real life. He probably
yeah.
Of
course.
Are you kidding? He's hilarious and talented. Yeah, the Crystal knows what I'm talking about. I can tell.
One particular film is like my guilty pleasure. It is the Fright Night remake. Now, the original, I still think he was actually sexy. I love him.
The older neighbor vampire?
Christopher Sarandon.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
They took all the gayness out of it. The guy that doesn't want to see his girlfriend but is staring on his sexy neighbor. And Rodney McDowell. Instead they made the Rodney McDowell. I like David Tennant, but
they're two different movies. Okay, they're two different movies. I judge them on their merits separately. I think the Fright Night remake is I'm the audience. I am 100% the audience. I am obsessed with David Tennant. He is so sexy. Colin Farrell so sexy. Anton Yelchin are so sexy. Imogen Poots so sexy. Toni Collette sexy.
Toni Collette's the other one I'm into in that movie. Everyone else is boring.
I
just like Toni Collette.
I'm also a sucker for Anton Yelchin, just period. I love him so much. What a loss.
Scotty.
He was fantastic. Odd Thomas. I love that movie. So Fright Night, it's like a style of horror that I obsess over. Like it's like if there was Scream and stuff. Like
it feels like in vampires you have a weakness for early 2000s, early 2010s.
Well, that's a very like indicative time period for me. I'm their age. I am their age. I lived through that style. Like that is my late teens, early 20s. That is I lived it.
That's why I'm averse to it because it was my time. I'm like, ew, my time, ew.
Oh, it gives me like this nostalgia that I think a lot of films give other people nostalgia with. And that's how Fright Night remake is for me. And I also watch it ungodly number of times. I think I watched that movie just last year and since October. I probably watched that movie like 20 plus times. I watched it so much.
Crystal, so what's your take on this? Colin Farrell hot or not in this movie?
I'm literally, if it's not already playing, it has been playing. There has been a scene playing in this video, like probably the entire time I've been talking.
Yeah.
Where Colin Farrell's just eating people, and I love it.
I like the brutality of it and how vicious he is keeping people in the dungeon, creating his army.
I have never more wanted to be bitten by somebody in my life than Colin Farrell in this movie. It makes me feral. Okay, like
feral for feral.
Feral for feral. Yeah.
He's like anti my type. He's like too pretty and boring. I mean, the most interesting thing about him is his eyebrows, and that's not a judgment. It's just my preference. He's all yours. I don't want him.
Sounds like it's time for a rapid fire ranking. Your top 5 sexiest vampires. Let's find out what your type is.
My 5th sexiest vampire, even though the first slot could really take all 5, is David Kiefer Sutherland from The Lost Boys. Even though I'm more attracted to him in a way where I want to be David than I want to be with David, but he's my number 5.
My number 5 is Louis from Interview with a Vampire.
Yeah, that's a good pick too. My 5th is Viago from What We Do in the Shadows, Taika Waititi.
Number 4 for me is Aaliyah as Akasha. She is gorgeous. She's the only thing I remember about that movie because she outshines everything.
I'm gonna toss it back to What We Do in the Shadows, and Vlad is my 4th pick. I freaking love him.
We love him, goofy boys. 4th, I have Celine from Underworld. That latex body though.
It's super hot. My number 3rd slot is Eve, Tilda Swinton in Only Lovers Left Alive. I think Tilda Swinton's Very hot.
My number 3 is going to go to Michael in The Lost Boys, with an honorable mention to Star, because I think she's gorgeous and I love her hair.
Power couple.
I'm jealous.
For third, I have Dracula, Gerard Butler in Dracula 2000.
You go. All power to you. You're awesome. I don't know. In my number 2 slot, I have the original Countess Elizabeth Bathory, played by Delphine Seyrig. Very European,
Daughters of
older
Darkness.
woman, sexy.
My number 2 spot is Jerry in Fright Night, the remake, aka Colin Farrell. Farrell for Farrell.
Guys.
Also, Farrell for Farrell. I have him in 2 as well. All right.
In first place, for my heart and my lust, is Jackie Daytona, the regular human bartender. It's Matt Berry from the What We Do in the Shadows TV show, Nadia's husband, the very perverted but harmless Laszlo. I freaking love Matt Berry. Oddly enough, my partner is like a lighter haired, older version of Matt Berry. It's a
silver version.
My number 1 is actually Hamish Linklater's character in Midnight Mass, Father Paul.
A good choice.
Daddy.
There was something that spoke to me about that, but I will give honorable mention to Spike and Angel from Buffy, because even though they're not on my list, they used to be.
Crystal's a cheater. She's a cheater. She's gonna mention more than 5. And I thought I was thirsty. In first place for me, it goes to Lestat, Stuart Townsend in Queen of the Damned, forever changing me. In the early 2000s. He's so sexy. He's got that like skinny, sickly rocker. I love. He's
like Mick Jagger kind of vibes.
Yes, yeah. Oh, the scene where he's just like lounged on the speakers and he introduces himself to his new band. Stop. So let us know in the comments. First, I want to know what you guys think of the sexy vampires. Tell me your sexy vampires, because that's all I care about. But also, let us know what your favorite vampire movies are. Did we cover them? We covered a lot of vampire films.
We tried to cover as many as we could, but there's a lot of very good ones. Tell us which one you really wish was in there, though.
Yeah. Next episode, we'll be covering zombies, like we alluded to earlier. So make sure you hit that notification bell so that you guys will be alerted. We do premieres for our videos. Also, hop in our Discord. Click all the links. They're all down below. All the links. Click them all. Until next time, bye.
Bye. Goodbye.